Hey, Bailey, can you let me know that you've stopped it and then restart it?
Yes, recording is started now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark Fishburn of FLIR, for today's webinar. We'll be discussing elevated skin temperature screening. I'm a huge believer in the effectiveness of fever screening for the reduction of risk associated with the transmission of the coronavirus or any other infectious disease. During the call today, if you have a question, you can click on the Show Conversation button and then type your question in on the right-hand side of your screen where it says Type a New Message. I will type Hello Team. And if you have a question that you would like Mark to answer during the course of the presentation, you can click on the hand to raise your hand to ask a question. But in general, we'd like to withhold the questions until the end. And thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Welcome, everybody. Mark Fishburn with FLIR Systems. I'm the Global Key Account Manager for Oil and Gas. One of the reasons that this topic has come up, and now it's not, slide's not moving. I think we got a delay here, guys. Anyway, hopefully the slides will catch up, is several months ago, I had posted a LinkedIn kind of a PSA for elevated body temperature, stating that many of the oil and gas customers probably already have some of the cameras to make this happen. There we go. So what we wanted to do was cover some of those cameras and what elevated body temperature could do for us, and do an introduction for those of you that are not familiar with elevated body temperature, the scan itself. So we're going to go through the temperature, the introduction, the cameras that are used, the cameras you may already own, and various ways to do that. So real quick, just to get you thinking about it, for those of you that are familiar with FLIR cameras and use the fleet of FLIR cameras in the field, these cameras on the left would be I just want to get you thinking about those cameras that would already have elevated body temperature, elevated screen temperature screening in it. They may need a firmware update, and we'll get to that, but I wanted to get you thinking about the cameras you already own, and we'll come back to this here in just a few. So a quick history on the FLIR cameras. Unfortunately for the world and for FLIR, this isn't the first outbreak. We've been dealing with infrared cameras in the medical industry all the way back to 1968 with the AGEMA infrared systems, which got purchased by FLIR. All of you know, obviously, about the SARS outbreak. And a year after the SARS outbreak in 2003, we did achieve the FDA 510 registration approval. And then these cameras were used again during the H1N1 outbreak in 2009, and again for the Ebola in 2014, and now obviously for C19 coronavirus. Now, there's some big differences in the way that these infrared cameras work, and not all infrared cameras are appropriate for EST screening. And that's why I wanted to show you those cameras up front first, because you may have other cameras, lower cost cameras, that will not do what we're going to talk about here. So these cameras that I showed you have special softwares in it, and they're contactless, obviously, but they measure the tear duct, and they're specially designed when we do the software and click it over to elevated body temperature to take a look at the inner eye duct, otherwise known as the canthus, where your eyes come together. And it's obviously a first line of defense. It's not the tell-all be-all, but it does let us know right up front that we have somebody that could use additional screening. And like I said, we did get the 510 approval back in 2003. So first and foremost, a lot of people, I was just telling Steve that I went and got a haircut last night, and they used just a regular spot thermometer on my forehead. And it did come out a little bit high because your skin temperature, if you walk out into the sun, is going to be a little bit higher than your core body temperature. And another example of that is I went to the dermatologist about 6 weeks ago, and they didn't let anybody wait in the office area. They came out and called you, actually. And I was pacing around in the sun on the phone. And when I walked in and they used the spot thermometer on me, I was very close to 100, like 99.5. And I said, there's no way. I said, I'm going to sit here in the cool for just a second and you can retake my temp. And it dropped precipitously just in a few minutes. So your outer skin temperature is going to be very different than your core temperature. And that's the reason why we use the tear duct, that inner canthus, to get that reading. So the FLIR cameras now have a stabilization software in it. So what it's actually doing is taking a sampling, and the camera will tell you if you change the batteries, it's going to make you take a resample. If you go from a cold nature to a warm nature, it knows it will make you take a resample. Sometimes the camera, after you have it set up, you can just turn and take it on yourself, whoever's doing the actual monitoring of people walking into a facility or building. Or you can call another colleague over and do 2 quick samples, but the camera will tell you, I need 2 samples, I need 3 samples. And then it's taking that average and it's spitting out the high and the low, taking an average. You're setting that you want the alarm to go off 3 points higher or 2 points higher, and that's an internal decision. And then that camera will start to alarm on the inner eyelid as it shows here. And this is actually a good representation of how that camera will look. So again, those cameras I showed you up front already have this on board. And if they don't, it's a simple firmware that we can do online. So it'll measure an alarm on the temperatures as we set it. Pretty easy to do. Another key point is that there's no black body required, and I'll go over why that is important here in just a second. But it's just another piece of equipment that doesn't need to be there and doesn't need to be calibrated. So when you do have a dynamic baseline, that sample average temperature, you're maximizing the accuracy of that screen per the employee. So black body real quick. Black bodies are used to get a constant. In other words, the camera is going to constantly look at the black body versus the person in front of it to try to get a regular reading. It's just one more thing that has to be set up, has to be purchased, has to be fine-tuned. And with our cameras, you don't need to do that. So I know there'll be questions on that. So lots of news out there, right? We don't know where we're at. Are we turning the corner? Is it over? News would say it's not. We've got a lot of things going on. We got numbers rising again. We got fevers. Now we're getting into sniffle season. We don't know if it's going to be the flu or if it's going to be C-19. So we need another first line of defense if we're not using it already. So in the oil and gas industry, you know, we need to get back to work. There's no doubt about it. So I know a lot of folks right now, I'm very close to large offices here in Colorado that are not back to work. This might be a solution to get some key people back into the office. But here's how we see it working for corporate offices and facilities, and then some infield personnel. So for corporate officers, you would have some 6-foot markers. You would queue up some lines. You'd be using the indoor electrical. You wouldn't need any other device or tenting inside the building. They would come in the door. And if you preferred, you could do it out front, obviously in front of the door. So for those facilities, you could set up a canopy. Most of these facilities already have a canopy. They use it for different reasons. 6-foot markers, queue it up. And you could either use a remote monitor or just use the camera by itself. And then for the field personnel, you still could use X-Tech, which is a FLIR company. has a handheld thermometer for just quick scans on the forehead. But here's how it would look. So on the left side there, you're seeing one of the cameras, and the cameras that you may own in the field already, and this is how you could set it up. You could have the screen facing the person if you wanted that person to see that they passed or failed, or you could have it looking back to your employee, just depending on the protocols of your facility or your company and how you wanted to handle the privacy issue of that. And again, it's a first line screen. So if you notice somebody that comes in and they're 101, you tap them on the shoulder, you pull them aside and say, listen, you need to go get a, what I call the brain scratch, go get the test and see if you got C19 or not. Remote operators, you can see that this is no employee present with the middle remote operator there. It's just giving you a pass or fail. And same with the kiosk on the right. And we'll talk about the kiosk a little bit here in just a second. So screening workflow, employees walk down a queued up line. They stop briefly. It only takes a few seconds. You cannot have your glasses on. You cannot have a hat on. The myth of infrared being able to see through things is not true. It can't go through your eyeglasses. So hat comes off, glasses come off as you're going into the line. It tells you what's going on, takes your temperature, pass or fail. And, you could queue up a line to say healthy, continue to go on. And if not, you tap that individual on the shoulder and they go either to the doctor or to your medical personnel and staff there. So we're doing about 12 people per minute per line, which adds up to about 720 people an hour. So it moves along pretty quick once it's set up. Recal on it, like I said, every now and then if you change batteries on a camera that's not powered hardline, you may have to redo the calibration on a couple of employees and then move down the line. If it's hardlined or kiosk, you don't have to do that. So some recommended solutions, back to the camera that I gave up front or showed up front that you may already own. You may already own some of the E75, 85, or 95s. You may already own a T1020 or a T6 or 5 series cameras. These cameras are all ready for EST. So I would propose that I be the quarterback on this. If you do own these cameras, feel free to reach out to me. I will connect you with a local FLIR rep who can really dial you in on the firmware and anything else you might need. But some of those things you might need include a mounting kit, a tripod, an HDMI splitter, just a mounting kit, or even the queue up stickers. We have all that available and we can get it to you. There's also a remote operation button, so that person can just click the button and it will kick the camera and tell you what's going on. And then there's the kiosks. So here's a good look at the kiosk station. Camera on top and a pad in the middle there. It's got some outputs on the back if you need those, and then power up as well. Power up comes down the bottom. This is all self-contained, so you can put this in right up front in the building or in the facility and do your pass-fail and move on. And with the kiosks, there are a couple of different options, whether that be a Pro model or the Pro Model Plus. It just changes the resolution and the detecting. Excuse me. And then you have some EST software on board detecting that inner tear duct on the cathus there. It's an MS Surface tablet, and everything that you see there is standalone. And again, that was security on the EST. I would say if you have any questions, let's get those questions answered now. If you have specific questions or specific questions on cameras or the needs of the kiosk, because you don't want to pull your cameras that are used for other things out of other facilities, please take my name and number down and let's have that conversation and get you connected with a local FLIR rep. So I will open it up for questions. Let's take a look here in the not seeing any questions in the chat so far. Steve, Craig, any of you guys have questions?
No questions here. Well, maybe one question. Have you seen schools or universities or other government agencies adopting the temperature screening?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing high tech adopt this pretty readily. We're seeing various installations of military adopt this. Definitely schools, both municipality schools and universities, so local schools and universities, as well as businesses and different, whether that be inside or outside facilities. So it's a bit of everything across the board.
Yeah, Mark, maybe you can elaborate on if you have anybody that might be interested in learning more or even getting trained on utilizing thermography as an EST solution. Maybe elaborate on what might be available there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg. There are many quick videos that we could get to you from the Infrared Training Center. They're also available at FLIR.com. If you're interested in getting those videos, please just ping me on my email address there and I can get those to you. You can also go to the infraredtrainingcenter.com and go into those tutorials and choose EST. If you wanted to do it quicker, I could pull those down for you though and get them straight to you.
Okay, thank you, Mark, very much. Excellent timing, excellent presentation. We sure appreciate your time today and appreciate the content and appreciate all of the participants today. So thank you very much, and that will conclude our webinar for today, Thursday, 11/12/2020.
Thank you all.